Hello, beautiful humans. I'm Jen Madrone. So, there are many definitions of the ego, many ideas of what the ego is. So, that can make it really confusing when we're trying to figure out what we're really talking about here. When we talk about our ego, when we talk about ego death, what does that mean? What are we really talking about? And so, in this context, the context of spiritual awakening, the ego that we are talking about is not really the ego that we learn about in psychology class. It's not really Freud's ego. What we are talking about is our attachment to our identity. The ego is the false self, and it's an entity that was created by the mind, made up of our beliefs about who we are, who we think we should be, judgments, and a compilation of cultural standards. And we've created this whole entity that we've allowed to take ownership of us, really. And we believe that we are this entity. And it is really destructive. One, because it's not who we are, and two, because it's really made up of all of our woundings and all of our judgments about ourselves and our conditioned beliefs and the experiences that we've had since the moment we were born that have interpreted who we are and what we are meant to be in this world. And so the ego, this false self or this identity that we've attached to, has been given the keys to the kingdom. We have handed over our control to the ego, which is a construct of the mind, and it's quite happily taken charge of things. And if the ego is created in the mind, it's an entity of the mind, it's run by the mind. So it's the collection of all those thoughts that incessantly run over and over and over in our heads and never really seem to have a break. And so those thoughts, yes, they're there, but it's when we get attached to them, when we believe them, because we really often have this idea that these thoughts are who we are and create who we are. And so if the ego, is this identity, there are many people that say, well, we need the ego. We need the ego to inspire us, to motivate us, to remind us what our jobs and responsibilities are in this world. And so if the ego is the mind, then in that sense we do need the mind. But I believe the ego is a construct of the mind being a fabulous tool that we need and can really elevate our lives and is essential for living. But the out of balance mind, which is also the out of balanced ego, is really a destructive monster. And so if we can separate the mind as being a tool from the mind, which is the ego, which is destructive and not helpful, so we can realize that, okay, yes, we need the mind. We're so grateful for the mind. But the ego, no, we don't need the destructive part of the mind. So this is where it can get a little confusing and gray, because yes, it's true. If the ego is the mind, then we can't completely kill the ego and we need the mind, but we need to bring it into balance. So we need to bring the mind into balance. We need to hand the keys of the kingdom back to the heart, and we need to put things back into perspective and back into balance, because if that egoic mind is constantly playing its record and doing its really limiting talk and conversation in our head, then it draws so much energy from the mind that we could be using as a tool. And so we are really missing out on the amount of energy that we could be using for productive things when it's time. Because the mind is a tool, is something that's just waiting. So optimally, we're present, we're in our hearts. This is the goal anyway. And then when it's time to complete a task, our mind jumps in, and it's clear and it's simple and it's not cluttered, and our emotions aren't clouded by this constant barrage of thoughts that we have. And so the ego that we're talking about here is the out of balance ego. And it is the attachment to thoughts. It is the construct of our identity and our attachment to our identity. And when we go through the awakening process, the intention and role is of the awakening process is to allow that ego to be absorbed by the authentic self, so that the authentic self can reclaim its authority, and so that we can live from that place of complete authenticity, complete joy, complete peace, and no longer be run by the chaos, the overwhelming emotions, anger, fear, sadness, anxiety of the mind that normally runs the show. And so through the process of transformation, as we allow that egoic self to be absorbed by the authentic self, that is what we are calling ego death. That is when the ego is transmuted into a higher energy, and so that our authentic self can live more fully, and so that we can live more fully. So I hope that was helpful. In the world of spiritual terms, everybody has a different opinion about what it is. And so we really have to decide what it means for ourselves. And when we're listening to someone else talk about it, we just decide whether that resonates with us or not, because it's the energy behind the words. Because if we could argue about words all day long. But when we're talking about ego in the spiritual sense, this is what we are referring to. So if you have any questions about that, just leave them in the comment section. If this is something that you feel deeply, maybe you didn't know what the words were or how the words really connected for you, but you're feeling this urge for your egoic self to be absorbed by the authentic self, that you're ready to stop the struggle and you're looking for some guidance in moving through this, then please send me a private message and we can talk and see if the work that I offer is a good fit for you. So have a great night. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the Facebook group. Thanks for listening.